So hi, everybody. Welcome to Help the Helpers. And let's welcome Tony WINISKI. Am I saying your name right?
It's WINISKI.
WINISKI. Is that right?
That's correct.
Good. Thank you. I'm very bad with names, but I think it's very important to say people's names right. And Tony is going to be sharing something of a book he's written about remembering and forgetting. Katerina, do you want to?
Tony WINISKI is a New Yorker by birth and a Viennese by choice. He studied biochemistry at Stony Brook University, Long Island, New York, earning a Bachelor of Science and PhD degrees, followed by postdoctoral research at the Carnegie Institute for Science in Baltimore, Maryland. In Maryland, he met his German wife, and in 1989 he followed her to Vienna, Austria. He presented at the recent Focusing Conference, and he comes here today to share a very interesting book. So over to you, Tony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now hit share screen. So this is not a book that I've written. This is a book written by the well-known author and neuroscientist Lisa Genova. You might remember the movie Still Alice about early onset Alzheimer's. Well, she wrote the book on which that movie is based. So this is her first nonfiction book, and in which she really is speaking more or less only as, she's not telling a story per se, she's giving useful information to the layperson on memory and forgetting. And I'm going to make a presentation of the book through my eyes and the eyes of informed eyes of a scientist and also a somatic practitioner. So let's see if I can. Good. So here's some information about myself as in the form of a disclaimer and how I created this presentation. I'm not a medical doctor or an expert in the area of memory. My background is science and biochemistry. In somatic education, I'm a certified Feldenkrais and child space practitioner and have been doing focusing since 2014. This presentation is based on the book Remember the Science of Memory and the Art of Forgetting by Lisa Genova, published in 2021. I also used information from the internet and also got the help of artificial intelligence in the form of Gemini Pro. So how did this whole thing start? And this is basically the story. The story has two parts. First, my brother has memory issues. So, and he watches too much television, and watching TV is known to be bad for memory, and reading is good for memory. So I went with him to the local library to pick out some books to read, where I just by chance came across Lisa Genova's book on memory and got my brother to agree to read it. And last year in 2025, we had a focusing get-together, reading Gene Gendlin's book, Focusing. And Katerina reads chapter 8 of the book. I make a comment in which I refer to Lisa Genova's book. She contacts me afterwards asking if I would like to present the book. I agree, so that's why we're all here. So I'm going to go through a chapter by chapter summary with a few bullet points for each chapter. So the introduction is the great memory paradox. I have to figure out how to. Okay, good. I can see a little bit better now. Good. We can see some things routinely thousands of times, yet most adults like a penny, but we can't, most adults can't accurately draw on or recall even which way President Lincoln faces. Human memory is simply the way it's built. It's inherently fallible, and its imperfections are a result of evolution, and it's not a hardware flaw. So any defects in our human memory is not a flaw, it's a feature. And the brain works in a default state. It naturally discards the vast majority of our daily experiences, typically retaining less than 3% of our recent times. The human brain evolved to prioritize and remember what is meaningful and while filtering out what is routine or boring. So the book is in 3 parts. Section 1 is the part on actually remembering. So how memories made, or to what extent can memories be made? The healthy brains can make an amazing amount, can store an amazing amount of information. Chess masters holding up to 100,000 moves in their memory, and memory athletes memorizing over 111,000 digits of the number pi. Memory works in a production line. There are several steps. The first is encoding or transforming sensory perceptions and active attention into neurological code that is signaling inside the brain. This information is consolidated. It's knit, these separate neural threads are knit together into a single cohesive data file via a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is also referred to as the memory weaver. Storage. This information of a memory is not stored in one spot in the brain. It's distributed across the brain. The interconnected pattern is stored across specific cortical areas that register the initial event, the hearing, the seeing, the smelling, etc. And so the final thing that's important for remembering is to be able to retrieve the memory. And this is a reconstructive scavenger hunt that reactivates the original neural circuit. Here's some neuroanatomy. I'll be referring to these things in some of the slides. Here's the hippocampus. If you can see my pointer, here's the hippocampus in this blue object in the center of the head of the brain. The prefrontal cortex, right next to the hippocampus, the amygdala. Basal ganglia is here, cerebellum is here, and the neocortex is here. So we can't make memories if we can't pay attention, if we can't retain what we do not actively observe. And most common memory failures, like losing your car keys or your phone, are actually failures of attention. The memory address was never created in the first place. And there's an illusion that we have that we think we actually remember things, but common visual items like for example, the Apple logo are rarely retrieved correctly from memory because our brains retain only the general pattern, the gist, not the exact details. And in terms of paying attention, there are thieves. Thieves of our attention are divided attention, multitasking, and constant screen distractions will drastically degrade the robustness and the structural strength of memory encoding. Being in the moment. Memory starts by being in the moment. We have what's called a working memory architecture in the brain, and that is the prefrontal cortex. That's what I showed in the previous slide. That's right here. This is where our working memory is. The temporary holding space in the prefrontal cortex is dedicated entirely to managing our immediate present moment. But there's a limit to what it can hold, and it's limited to 7 plus or minus 2 individual items for 15 to 30 seconds before subsequently incoming data physically displaces it. There's a buffer for this information, for the sense that comes to our senses. There's something called a visual spatial scratch pad for visual rays, and a phonological loop, which is a brief internal audio soundtrack playing on our head. And there are tricks that we can do to maximize this working memory architecture. One is chunking or bundling continuous strings of data into meaningful groups, such as phone numbers. If you take a phone number and you remove all the dashes and the parentheses, and you just put it to as a string of numbers, that's much harder to remember than if you have area code 201, next 3 numbers, next 4 numbers. And there's also a syllable constraint. Each syllable is basically an item. So items that have several syllables take longer to mentally articulate in the phonological loop, reducing the holding capacity. Again, this is not a flaw, it's a feature of the system. Now, chapter 4 goes on to talk about another type of memory. There are several types of memory. Yeah. One is for facts. Now, this is muscle memory. This is memories for motor skills and automatic procedures such as driving, typing, skiing, etc. And these reside entirely below our conscious awareness. There's something called the motor circuit. While declarative facts require the hippocampus, procedural skills are bound together by the part of the brain called the basal ganglia and continually refined by the cerebellum. So it bypasses the hippocampus. Muscle memory is processed by the basal ganglia and refined here by the cerebellum. Now, there's an interesting story presented in the book in the case of HM. HM stands for the name of the person Henry Molaison. Henry Molaison was a person back in the 1950s, early 50s, who was suffering from intense seizures, epileptic seizures. And none of the medications at the time could help him. So they did something quite drastic with him, which was to remove not one, but both of his hippocampi. So he had no hippocampus. So he was unable to remember, hold any new memories or form any new memories after the age in which that surgery was done, and that was the age was 27. But even if he couldn't form new memories about episodes and facts, he still was successfully able to master complex mirror drawing over tasks over consecutive days. He got better and better at it. So every time he started, he would be better than the previous time, even if he had no conscious memory of ever having practiced them. So constant repetition is very important in our neuroplastic real estate. Repetition physically expands the corresponding geographic regions of the motor cortex, and that fixes the muscle memory and makes it more durable. Good, we've seen this already. Now, so that's muscle memory. Now here's the type of memory simply for facts, what the author calls the brain's Wikipedia. And this is called semantic memory. The brain's structured data, it's the repository for facts, concepts, personal biography, and it's disconnected from any specific where and when life experience. It's disconnected from the autobiography of your life. And there are ways of improving this type of creating these type of memories. One is to space it out over time rather than cramming that information in our heads. If we can distribute the learning over consecutive days, that significantly beats forcing it in all at once, and because it gives the hippocampus time to stabilize the synaptic changes. Another thing that helps us for learning new factual information is testing, self-testing. Active self-quizzing reactivates neural pathways, more than doubling long-term retention compared to just passively reading and passively learning. And there is a feature of our nervous system, it's a visual spatial strength, where we can store things visually. So there's something called the method of the memory palace, where we can map certain things in space, in our room, in anything that's familiar to us. We can place certain things in certain parts of our spatial architecture, our spatial area, and that makes it much easier to remember. Now, the next chapter talks about what's called episodic memories, the memories for what has actually happened to you in your life. It's your personal life story narrative. It's explicitly anchored to a specific time and a specific place. And in all of this, the brain will ignore ordinary predictable events like daily commutes, morning hygiene. So, what you ate last Thursday is probably gone from your memory. But if there was something associated interesting with your eating supper last Thursday, you'll remember it. If that something captures surprise, meaning, and high emotion. So that's the way the brain filters information in. And the way that works is that part right next to the hippocampus, the amygdala, sets an alarm off. Any emotion will prompt the amygdala to send signals telling the hippocampus, this is vital, freeze frame it, remember it. And in terms of what we can remember from our lives, there are certain milestones. There's the childhood amnesia. We basically don't remember much what happens before the ages of 3 or even 6. But that mental fog lifts at around age 6 as language structure evolves to organize our lives' narratives. And then there's a certain part of our life referred to as the reminiscence bump. And that's generally for most people, ages of 15 to 30. And it's because there's a high concentration of autobiographical memories clustered during this period of life. It's where we have a lot of our firsts in our lives, our first date, our first kiss, maybe our first major disappointment, our first academic achievements, first time driving. Those milestones generally are remembered more easily. So the section 2 of the book goes from remembering to forgetting, and forgetting is nothing that should be underestimated. So chapter 7 is maybe for many people shocking in that it basically states that most of our memories are wrong. And they're wrong because of the feature of our nervous system. Because retrieving memories is not playing back a digital video file, like of this recording of my presentation. It's a structural reconstruction. The nervous system has to reconstruct the memory. And then there's a word trap. Every time you recall an episodic memory, it becomes fluid. Means it can be changed. Means you can edit it based on your current emotional state. And then, as in the Microsoft program Word, you can hit save, and that serves to reconsolidate and permanently overwrite the original memory. And then there's the issue of language. Subtle shifts in vocabulary change recollection. So when they asked people who looked at a video of 2 cars coming to contact, and if they asked them how fast they thought the cars were going, the verb they used had an influence. If they asked them how fast the cars smashed into each other versus how fast they hit into each other, or how fast they made contact with each other, that had an influence on what speed they thought the cars were going at, and whether in fact there was any damage. In this one study, they had 2 cars come into contact. There was no broken glass, but if they framed the question as how fast were the cars did they smash into each other, then people had the incorrect memory that there was a broken glass generated in the collision. So there's something called flashbulb memory. These are things of shocking public events such as 9/11, the space shuttle explosions. they may feel vividly accurate, but studies, data proves that these memories distort dramatically over time, despite the people being 100% confident that these memories are accurate. I extend this a little bit into, I took a few other points from the chapter because I think they're relevant for focusing. One is the problem of written language. Putting any sensory experience into written words distorts and narrows the original memory of the experience, which I would call the sin of omission, because if we're writing anything down, we're going to forget. And studies have also, in one of these studies, they showed some event, and those people who actually sat down and wrote about the event afterwards had a greater distortion of the original memory than those who did not write it down. Then there's also the problem of spoken language. Even talking about our memory slices the memory thinner. And this, I think, can even apply to muscle memory. And at this point, I can tell a short story of a time I had a short discussion with Gene Gendlin. This was going a few years before he passed, when Anne Weiser Cornell organized conversations with herself and Gene. And you could ask Gene any question you wanted. And I brought up the case of somebody who told me how he had defeated a tennis player who had a much better tennis backhand. After losing the first set, this person I knew who was a bit of a conniver went up to the better tennis player and said, "Wow, you have a really great tennis hand. Can you show me how your tennis backhand works?" Well, the better tennis player demonstrated, verbally described his backhand, and in all subsequent sets that they played, that backhand no longer worked. And this friend of mine, this college colleague, won all of those games. When I presented the story to Gene, I said, "Well, what was going on there? Did telling the story deconstruct the muscle memory of how to do the backhand?" And Gene, being the philosopher, said he didn't like the word deconstruct, but he said that one can use language to talk about something like a tennis backhand or a golf swing, but at the moment when you're talking about that, you need to be in contact with the felt sense of what that backhand is. You have to be you have to have an embodied sense of the backhand and speak from that, and not speak from just concepts in your head of what the backhand would be. So that was the issue with spoken language. So in addition to memories getting narrowed, memories can also expand as they're getting retold. So episodes in our life can expand with information coming from background or new interpretations, things that never happened in the first place, but just get added on over time. Okay, so I just bring up a question here regarding to the focusing method, and this comes a little bit later on in the talk. Since our memories can change with every recall and deviate from the original unspoken memory first created in our brains, does the implicit contain the accurate original memory? Can sensing person allow us to explicate what exactly happened? Does the body actually know the score? Is accuracy in terms of memories actually important? Or can fluid, inaccurate memories actually serve to carry life forward? Just some questions for thought. Chapter 8 is something we can all sympathize with. It's called tip of the tongue. And tip of the tongue memories, where we see the face of an actor, but we have the name of the actor on the tip of our tongues, but it's just the name, the word for something doesn't come. And this is tip of the tongue blocking is a temporary, it's called a temporary retrieval block. And it happens when neurons storing the data fail to cleanly connect to the phonological nodes needed to actually pronounce the words. in the book, the author refers to what's called the ugly sisters, and these are decoy words that sound or mean something similar to the word you're trying to remember. It hijacks your attention and leads you down the wrong rabbit holes in terms of trying to find out the name of what you were trying to remember. And it's easier to remember things if we can connect them with rich sensory imagery connections. And if you can associate somebody's name whose name is Baker with the visual imagery of someone who is actually a baker, it makes it easier to remember that. Age of even young people suffer tip of the tongue blocks, and even a 25-year-old can have multiple of them a week, and it's not a sign of dementia, but rather a processing speed bottleneck. Okay, so here's something I tried to, and actually this is perhaps how I made the initial comment at that Reading Freshly get together back in 2025. In the chapter 8, memories actually brought up, and using focusing to try to recall a memory or something you've forgotten. And I tried to reconstruct that here with a bit of help of AI. So when a word is blocked during the tip of the tongue state, the analytical mind throws out persistent incorrect decoy words, the so-called ugly sisters. This creates cognitive noise and blocks the memory we want to remember. But there's the felt sense of the missing data. And the focusing method shows that even when a memory is blocked, the body carries a specific physical flavor or quality of the missing memory as a vague, wordless sensation it's somewhere in the body. And by dropping out of the analytical mind to sit quietly with this physical sensation, calls off the active hunt for the memory, lowers the noise in the prefrontal cortex, and allows the brain to stop hacking and persevating on the wrong neural neighborhood, and identifying a descriptive verbal anchor, the handle for the sensation, verifying it against the bodily felt feeling triggers the felt shift, reestablishing the neural path so that the blocked memory can surface. Next chapter, don't forget to remember. This is an area where human memory is particularly weak. Remembering to do things, remembering to execute a planned intention at a future point in time. The brain is really is not designed for this. It's fundamentally terrible about how to remember, about remembering to remember unless we have an external intervention. And there are stories of famous cellists who will leave their multi-million-dollar cellos in taxi cabs in New York City, and surgeons leaving surgical tools inside of patients after an operation because the visual cues to remove them disappear from sight, out of mind. So the helps for this, the corrections, the aids are checklists and highly specific implementation intentions, and they're mandatory to augment unreliable prospective memory processing. Forgetting, this too shall pass, chapter 10. There's something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Unsupported, non-meaningful data, nonsense syllables, for example, will drop off very quickly by nearly 50% within 20 minutes after having learned them. And then there is just, if things aren't used, there's a process called synaptic pruning. If the structural connections in the brain that represent a memory remain dormant for too long, then that is, they're not reactivated, the neurons physically retract their connections and erasing the trace. But memory, the good news is that memory can be regained because relearning forgotten data takes fewer attempts than the original effort, proving that there still is some type of deep trace architecture for the memory. And putting an effort to overlearn something, deliberately studying past whatever is 100% needed to pass a test, for example, will build up a lot of a buffer, so-called structural armor against the erosion of memory over time. Chapter 11, forget about it. Okay, this is people who maybe don't come from the East Coast or the Northeast. This is East Coast jargon from New York or Boston about the three words "forget about it" are linked together. And what this chapter is about is to highlight that an optimally functioning memory system, in that type of system, forgetting is just as important as remembering. A finely orchestrated balancing act between data storage and data disposal. And they mentioned in that chapter a person by the name of Solomon Shereshevsky, a man who simply couldn't forget. His nervous system, his memory would accumulate all sorts of irrelevant data that he couldn't get rid of. And this profoundly handicapped him because he couldn't focus on things he needed to focus on because there was so much irrelevant data and memories in his system. For most of us, there is an internal innate filtering cleanse that happens every day, where you might think of the daily memories being a whiteboard, and it's cleaned of the routine junk from yesterday, such as where you parked your car yesterday, preventing mental cross contamination, so that when you drive somewhere today and park your car, you can remember today's parking spot and not the parking spot from yesterday. Sometimes we need to motivate forgetting. There's a certain positivity bias. We will selectively consolidate positive self traits and filter out negative self traits. We can eliminate memories we want to forget about by just resisting memory cues to remember them, to intentionally starve unwanted networks, starve them of reinforcement. We do that by not going there, not thinking about it, not rehearsing any of these memories in our head. And another way of dealing with difficult memories, such as traumas, is the potential to re-edit. We can revisit a memory, create and store a newer, non-traumatic version of it. And this made me think about forgetting via focusing. Clearing a space is a kind of gaining distance, putting things at some distance away, and perhaps creating enough distance from a traumatic memory so that the details feel less traumatic. And in that situation, store that version of the memory. And then there's muscle memory. If you've tried to replace an old password with a new password, you, like the author, may, and myself, you may find yourself typing the old password in for a while before the new password really sits. So one has to replace the old password with a new one, but not only that, but also type it over and over again. So it becomes a new muscle memory. Or replace an old golf swing with a better one and then practice that. Or in the Feldenkrais method, explore variations of a movement pattern. And then the system is not focused on just one muscle memory, but has a resource, a repertoire of different things to draw on. The next chapter talks about normal aging. This is something we all face, are facing, will face. There are parts of normal aging, the memory, that are resilient. Aging does not impact muscle memory baseline retention or overall somatic vocabulary depth. For example, older adults generally know more facts than younger people. But there are slowdowns. The normal aging brings slower processing speeds, a decrease in working memory holding times, and a lower resistance to environmental distractions. Free recall, that is without any cues, to try to remember something, the name of an actor or a place without any cues, that free recall drops noticeably after age 40, but the recognition capabilities remain intact. So if we're given those cues for the name of the actor or the name of that place, then we can remember it. And yeah, older brains tend to have more of this natural positivity bias than younger brains, recalling double the amount of pleasant imagery over negative imagery. So the bad news in terms of normal aging is that nothing can be done to combat it. Its corrosive effects on memory performance. But the good news is that the overall experience doesn't have to be of memory decline. There are strategies and insights in the appendix of the book that will improve memory at any age. Chapter 13, Alzheimer's. This is I suppose any of us who lives long enough will get it, and it's driven by an abnormal cascade of plaques of amyloid beta. Amyloid beta itself is not a problem, but when these individual proteins start sticking to each other to form plaques, they choke synapses. And this is followed by neurofibrillary tangles inside the nerve cells and leading to widespread death of neurons in the brain. And unfortunately, this starts the battleground zero in this war, the war that Alzheimer's wages in our brains, starts directly in the memory weaver in the hippocampus, meaning the early symptom is the inability to form new episodic memories while the old ones remain intact. But it's important to distinguish between normal mistakes that we make with memory versus pathology. Misplacing keys due to low attention, but finding them later, that's normal. If you find keys inside your freezer or forget what keys are used for, then that's a warning sign for Alzheimer's. It may start in the hippocampus, but it spreads out to compromise this Alzheimer's, the beta amyloid plaques. It spreads outward to compromise spatial navigation, getting lost in your familiar neighborhood, and eventually destroys fundamental muscle memories like swallowing. Chapter 14 talks about putting things in context in order to recall memories when we're having trouble remembering them. Retrieval is highly optimized when your internal and external environment matches the condition present during encoding. If you walk into a kitchen and you completely forget why you are there, and if you're walking there from your bedroom, it's because you lost the physical cues of your bedroom. Simply go back to the bedroom, look around, and you'll see the visual cue that reminded you of why you wanted to go into your kitchen. And after reading the book, I can confirm this works quite well. I will go from one room to another and ask myself, well, why did I come here? And then I go back to the original room immediately because I know that works. And I say, okay, I forgot that. Now, and then I go back to the other room and know what I'm looking for. So in terms of context-dependent memory, that first point, an example of that is the scuba experiment. Divers who learn word lists, who will learn a list of words 20 feet underwater, can recall them much better if they're underwater than if they're retested on a dry beach. And there's also the state that you happen to be in affects your internal context, how much caffeine you have in your body, how exhausted you are, what mood you're in. It forms part of your memory profile. So the advice is study how you plan to test. So if you expect that you're going to be really stressed out or tired during the test, then learn when you're stressed out and tired, or if you're on a high caffeine level, if you have a lot of caffeine in your body while studying, well, put a lot of caffeine in your body when you take the test. I wish I had known that when I was at the university. Chapter 15, stressed out. Acute stress fires a number of factors in the brain, adrenaline, cortisol, great at boosting immediate focus. And it helps lock down memory loops central to the survival threat. Moderate temporary stress optimizes our performance. Excessive or non-existent stress causes structural baseline failures. Unrelenting stress, chronic stress floods the brain with cortisol, actively blocking the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus. Chronic anxiety physically reduces hippocampal volume. And daily meditation, mindfulness practices can reverse this, demonstrating increasing gray matter density in the hippocampus over an 8-week period. Sleep, go to sleep. A common sleep deficiency is a common malady. Sleep deprivation slows frontal cortex processing, fracturing the baseline ability to focus and encode data. When we sleep at night, the sleep runs a high-speed simulation of how your day, what you learned during the day. And this improves your skill and motor memory performance, leading to a 20% boost in speed and a 30% increase in accuracy. Taking naps is also useful. In this book, I discovered something called learned about the nappuccino. You take a cappuccino before you take a nap, and a 20-minute nap clears the hippocampus to make room for incoming data. And drinking caffeine immediately beforehand provides an alert transition after you wake up out of that nap. The last point is extremely important. The synaptic cleanse. During deep sleep, the brain's waste management system flushes out metabolic waste, specifically clearing amyloid beta to lower Alzheimer's risk. Chapter 7 focuses on Alzheimer's prevention. Only 2% of Alzheimer's are entirely genetic. So the good news is that lifestyle choices, which we can make, directly dictate amyloid accumulation for the vast majority of people. You can have a good positive impact on preventing Alzheimer's through diet. Adhering to Mediterranean or the so-called MIND diets will reduce diagnosis of Alzheimer's by 1/3 to 1/2. Mediterranean diet, I think everyone is familiar with. The MIND diet is a combination of the Mediterranean plus what's called the DASH diet, or diet specifically used to reduce blood pressure. There are some myths that need to be debunked. There is absolutely no data indicating that red wine, supplements like ginkgo biloba or coconut oil prevent dementia. And the best thing you can do to prevent age-related shrinking of your hippocampus is to do regular aerobic exercise and brisk walking. And that can give you a benefit by reduce your risk by 40%. Another thing that's useful is building a cognitive reserve. And that can be achieved by learning brand new complex skills. And those processes of learning, that whole process of learning brand new complex skills weaves a rich web of redundant synapses, allowing the brain to successfully bypass localized damage. And a study was done, a 20-year study, more than 30-year study with 678 Catholic nuns, all living in the same order, all living under the same conditions of diet and lifestyle and whatever. But the sisters had different roles that they played. Some did just manual labor, and others were academic scholars who would work as university professors, sometimes well into their 80s. And these nuns donated their brains to science, and autopsies post-mortem revealed that the brains of nuns who were the scholars, who always on the learning curve, constantly learning and learning new information and new things, even if they had structurally a lot of accumulation of amyloid plaques, this was not correlated with any symptomology. These nuns had no cognitive decline, no evidence of Alzheimer's till the day they died. So this shows that building a reserve can give us, buy us time, give us an extra buffer against Alzheimer's. So chapter 18 is the memory paradox is called by the author. Memory is at the same time, it's everything and it's nothing. It's vital. It's a monumental cognitive tool that we all need. And yet, on the other hand, it's also inherently fragile and incomplete. And if we realize that our memories for what happened are naturally edited, it can allow us to drop stressful battles over who was right and accept minor everyday mistakes. And there's limits to mastery. Even the world's most elite masters are highly localized in what they remember. So this pi champion, who was actually a retired 69-year-old Japanese engineer, he could memorize pi to over 111,000 digits. He could still forget his wife's birthday. And the master cellist could still forget his very expensive cello in the back trunk of a taxi cab in New York City. So a person's true human identity doesn't consist of memory alone. Failing memory can't steal a person's sense of humor, core values, or capacity for deep human connection. Emotional memory will outlast narrative structure. Even in end-stage dementia, a person who has forgotten names and faces entirely can still understand, give, and feel love. Appendix is what to do about it. I'm going to go through this quickly. Probably people want to have a discussion about this. Things that we can do, we can pay attention, will definitely help. We can see it or visualize what we want to remember. We make what we want to remember meaningful. We use our imagination to put it in a form that will be attractive for us to remember. We can use the visual, spatial, location, storage ability of our brains to put things we want to remember in certain places in our houses. We can make things that we want to remember about us, because things that are connected to ourselves, we have a greater likelihood of remembering. So if we connect anything we want to remember to something about ourselves, that's better. We look for the drama, things that are charged or emotionally charged or very intense life experiences. If we look for the drama and the excitement of our lives, we'll probably remember more of it. And mixing it up, get out of routines, look for ways to make days and nights special, do things that are memorable, and then they will become memorable. Practice, of course, everyone knows, practice what you want to remember. As we get older, don't hesitate to use strong retrieval cues, pillboxes, or to-do lists or whatever. Be dependent on the strong retrieval cues. Be positive about your memory and it'll function better. Externalize the memory, like as I mentioned, pillboxes or to-do list calendars. Don't shy away from technology. Using smartphones or Google doesn't trigger amnesia. It just gives us extra tools to remember what we want to remember. Okay, putting things into context, or rather replicating the context. If you want to remember something, replicate the study environment when you want to recall that information. Reduce stress, reduce chronic anxiety, and learn how to finally learn how to unblock stuck proper names by associating them with some kind of function, like baker, being a baker. So this last part I'll go through quickly. It's short. This is what the book doesn't talk about, and this comes from my personal background in somatics and my understanding of physiology. This is something mentioned in the book. The author doesn't go into a lot of detail about it. It's the importance of a deep sleep for clearing out the brain. It's something called the brain's lymphatic system. It's a combination. These are glial cells in the brain that work together with the lymphatic system to pump cerebrospinal fluid through the intracellular spaces of the brain and flush out amyloid beta. And it's 60% more efficient during non-REM deep sleep because of the low level of the factor noradrenaline, or norepinephrine. It allows brain cells to shrink so there's more spaces between the cells to flush out the fluid. If we're awake, the cells swell up again, and then the clearance drops to 10%. But daytime clearance is not static, and you can actually do something to enhance that with cardiorespiratory forces, changes in hydrostatic pressure, body posture, and circadian fluctuation. Breathing is something the author did not mention at all. There's something called the thoracic pump. Forced inspiration drops intrathoracic pressure here around the lungs, and it generates a powerful vacuum in the chest cavity. And this vacuum, I'll go to the next slide to describe that better. So breathing in deeply will decrease the pressure in this cavity. So it will draw blood from the brain through this vein called the superior vena cava, pulling oxygen-poor blood from the brain. And at the same time, it will deep, intense nasal breathing will bring cerebrospinal fluid up through the spinal cord through the entrance into the skull called the foramen magnum, actively bringing in cerebrospinal fluid into the brain to clean it. So we can actually use our breathing to brainwash ourselves, so to speak. And I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner, so I wanted to bring the Feldenkrais method into how it might help memory. Well, it can be used to help what's called unclog the external plumbing. We can do somatic practices, somatic lessons to relieve chronic muscular bracing around the neck, jaw, and spine. We can remove mechanical compression from the jugular region, the forearm region, the neck region, and pressure from the lymphatic tracts, and make it easier. We clear the path and open the paths up for drainage of the cerebrospinal fluid. And if you happen to fall asleep during a Feldenkrais lesson, which many of us do, you get the benefits of delta deep wave associated internal brain cleansing. And in terms of posture, decompression, gravity, there are neuroimaging studies that confirm that sleeping on your side, preferably on the right side, is the most efficient posture for lymphatic clearance compared to sleeping on your back or on your belly. Right lateral positioning keeps the dominant right internal jugular vein completely open, maximizing gravity-assisted drainage toward the heart. Breathe through your nose. Mouth breathing is a modern malady. It's important to breathe through the nose. Intracranial electroencephalograph recordings document that nasal breathing, not oral breathing, just nasal respiration explicitly entrains will create human limbic oscillations in the amygdala and the hippocampus, activating those regions, important for memory. And nasal airflow stimulates what's called the upper vault mechanoreceptors located in the roof of the nasal cavity, maximizing neural excitability inside the hippocampus to facilitate memory retrieval. And finally, these are just the references for anyone who's interested in looking up more information on any of those topics. Let's see if I can get out of screen share. I'll stop share. Good. And I can go into gallery. Good. Thank you for your attention. I hope that wasn't too painful. I hope it was at least somewhat memorable.
Thank you. You know, maybe it would be interesting to ask, what did you remember of what Tony said?
I remember him mentioning deep, intense nasal breathing. What does he mean by that? Deep, intense nasal breathing.
Well, nasal is clear. We breathe through the
Yes, but
breathe
what
through the
does the
nose.
deep and the intense?
Intense means a deep diaphragmatic breathing.
How does the nasal come into it?
Your nose rather than your
Yes,
mouth.
I know. Is there anything
Okay.
special? Are there
Well, the
different
nasal,
types of nasal breathing?
well, the nasal comes into it, regardless of which, of course, you're correct, the different types of nasal breathing, but nasal breathing in general will create these will create oscillations in the part of the brain responsible for memory creation and memory retrieval. That's what's important about it. And the diaphragmatic is important because it helps build the create this drop in intrathoracic pressure in the chest that not only brings in air into the lungs, but it brings brain blood through the veins from the head, and at the same time drives cerebrospinal fluid up the spinal cord into the brain.
Okay. Last question from me. You said deep sleep helps to clear the brain. Aside from the normally known that daylight exposure activity helps you deep sleep, what else helps you deep sleep in your experience?
Sorry, can you repeat that? You said you asked,
What helps deep sleep in your experience?
oh, what helps deep sleep?
Yeah, besides being active in the day and daylight exposure, what else?
Um, okay, being active during the daytime builds up something called sleep pressure. Being able to get the body into a relaxed state, in other words, to drop cortisol levels, will enable deep sleep to happen. Yeah. What definitely I can tell you, breathing. This is another aspect of breath that comes in. I didn't mention, but many people who get older suffer what's called sleep apnea. Probably of the people who are present here, there's probably at least one person who has sleep apnea, whether they know it or not. And what happens is that as we fall asleep, we're in bed and we start to fall asleep, the muscles, the smooth muscles around the respiratory passageways relax. And in older people, and especially overweight people, they can then collapse to the point where not enough, you don't get enough airflow. And if you don't get enough airflow, the blood oxygen concentration drops. That sends an alarm signal to the brain to wake up, not to completely wake up, but to wake up from deep sleep into lighter sleep or into dreamlike REM sleep. So that's another aspect where breathing is critical. Good. I can see with the thumbs up, I answered it to your satisfaction.
We have a hand, Jim.
Yeah,
And
I wanted to say something.
good.
You asked what we remember. I remember that you said with Alzheimer that the proteins stick together, but nobody ever said to me that that blocks the synapses. They always say it interferes with brain function, but you explained it very clearly. That kind of lit a bulb in my head that it blocks the synapses, and that's why everything gets, doesn't work as well.
Right, because it's the communication takes part across the synapses.
Right,
So that's
exactly.
how nerves, right, the nerves communicate across those synapses.
Right. So that was helpful, that detail. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ruth.
Well, but a very, very simple thing, but feels pretty profound. What I remember is that you have to pay attention to remember. And that to me, I keep asking, well, how's this connected with focusing? Is in focusing, we deeply pay attention through our bodies, our hearts, our everything. And I'm thinking how often I try to multitask, and I know it's not it's not gonna, it's not effective, and I know it usually gets me hurt or something, but I just love that you have to pay attention to remember. So, thank
Yeah,
you.
this is
Pretty,
even in this the chapter of the focusing book that set this off, the chapter that Katerina read, which was chapter 8. If you have, I think it's called, if you have trouble getting a felt sense, Jean refers to memory a number of times, saying, well, you need to give it. He talks about distraction. He said you need to pay attention. You need to give it time. It takes 30 seconds, or he said 30 seconds to 60 seconds, or 3 to 4 minutes if you have to add in distractions.
30 to 60 seconds for what?
For a felt sense to form.
Oh,
But then he mentions 3 to 4 minutes if you have to deal with distractions.
oh, or longer.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah. Hmm.
focusing still, it's depends on paying attention, depends on memory.
And for some reason, Joan Klagsburn always emphasized, because she does a lot of work with happiness and positive psychology, is that to really take in, form positive memories, it takes longer than the negative ones. But I think then they've also explained that the negative ones, we don't have to worry about taking the time to let them in, because we replay them so often in our minds that they're getting plenty of airtime, if
Right.
not right at the time. But
There
yes,
is
probably not that.
Klagsborn. Yeah, I took part in an offering she gave on a webinar, and yeah, I remember mentioning and reading elsewhere that you have to, I think, remember, in order to shift your state of how positive are versus negative you are, you have to remember 3 times more positive things than negative things to shift the balance.
Wow. Scary. Thank you.
So, Lynn, it was good. You actually applied one of the aspects of the book, because by asking people to remember, you're quizzing them. You're helping their memory.
Well, it's also what was meaningful. I think meaning is so connected to all of this. And of course, as a therapist, what the meaning of something, I think, can't really be measured. Like the accuracy of a memory will be, it will be so particular and unique to that person. What was really accurate? I was wondering about that. If you could say more about that, Tony.
Well, this is to there's at least 2 aspects. One aspect is to form the memory in the first place. If something is, ho hum, if it's routine, boring, if it lacks meaning, then it's not going to get, our nervous system won't filter it in. But if something has meaning for us, an event has great meaning for us, then we will remember it and remember more of it. So that's the one aspect. But on the other hand, the author also points out that no matter how much you remember, even things that are meaningful, our memories still aren't perfect, because our memory wasn't built for accuracy. And this is, I brought up some of these questions in the slides, which I think are fundamental questions. If we are in a situation like we are now, there's a lot that my nervous system is taking in, the images of all of you on the screen, the environment I happen to be in, the temperature, the lighting, the whatever, the surface I'm sitting in. Can the body hold all of that? Even if the brain, the quote unquote brain, can't hold it, can the body hold that and, if need be, retrieve it? does that go into our system as implicit knowledge? And can it be explicated? That's a question I don't have a good answer for, right? But it seems to me a fundamental question, yeah? Because if the brain is Gene refers to remembering something. Gene goes to an even more extreme example in chapter 8. He's talking about a situation like we have now. We're all together, we're in a discussion room. I'm speaking, and maybe somebody else here while I'm speaking, it wants to contribute something. And they have it in their head, and maybe they raise their hands. And then when it's their time to speak, a distraction might come right before that, so they no longer know what they wanted to say. But they don't even have words as anchors or hooks to pull that information, because they just have a sense of what they wanted to say. They don't have the words. They haven't formulated the words yet. They haven't formulated the language because they haven't spoken yet. And yet then something distracts their system. We put our attention to that person, and they struggle to remember. And Gene uses that as in that chapter, describes the process of someone just sitting and sitting and waiting for a felt sense of what they wanted to say to emerge. That's a felt sense of the pre-verbal stage even. So how much of that can really be stored long-term and is it even important? I bring that point out as well. Because if the whole point of whatever we do is to carry life forward, it doesn't really matter whether the fact in the past was historically accurate, or whether we get some nugget from it or get some inspiration from it that helps us carry our situation in the present forward. That's a deep philosophical point. And I don't have an answer for that, but I do know that I think it was Gene mentioned that the present moment is always influenced by the past, implying also memories, and the future. So the present moment is not just memory. It's not just the memory. It's our interacting with the whole system, and our memory is part of that whole system. So that makes me feel a bit better about not remembering things accurately. Okay, I see some hands up. Dorothy?
Yeah, I find it interesting what you just said. There's something very hopeful about the idea of retelling a story around trauma and pulling up something fresh and new. And I'm curious what you'd have to say about when somebody has a need to repeat a traumatic event, could be a recent one, not necessarily in the past, many, many times over and over again. I have a curiosity about what's going on, what the need is, what the wish is, what the hope from the person listening to that person. I'm just very curious about it. If you have any thoughts about that need to repeat.
Well, I mean, I can say disclaimer. I don't know the answer, but I can tell you what I sense, what I suspect, what might be the case for some people. When you say repeat, you mean like repeat in their head, or verbally repeat something? You mean
verbally repeat the story of what happened many times over time, over a week, over 2 weeks.
Okay, I'm going to use non-technical language and saying, well, that maybe they're trying to come to grips with it. Maybe it helps them get some distance from it. Well, I mean, I'll give you the example with fairy tales. I have three kids, 3 sons, and when they were all small, my wife and I read stories to them, read fairy tales, and some of them are, pretty gruesome, actually. Of what happens to certain people and getting devoured by the wolf or whatever. So, but they're not visual. I mean, the only visualization happens in the minds of the children, but they're listening to the story, and it's something they can see, something that is in principle for the people involved in it traumatic, but there's a distance to it because they're hearing it in the form of a story. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's as indicated by the author Lisa Genova, because memory gets re-edited every time we repeat it, we recall it. It creates the possibility of re-editing it so that it's less traumatic.
Yeah.
It could go the other way. It could become more traumatic, but perhaps it might become less traumatic. And that's in one of the slides I suggested that maybe this is an aspect where memory is playing a role in clearing a space, or as Jean would say, getting some space between you and it. Choosing the right distance so that you don't break complete connection from it, but not so close that it's threatening. So you can still be in contact with it, and you end the session, and if you can end it with that memory, then you have a memory of that situation as being less scary, less traumatic as it originally was.
That makes sense.
Just a thought aside on the process of how things can work.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Just to respond, I definitely noticed that there's some kind of ease. The tension that began the story, there's an ease in the retelling. Even if it's multiple retelling in one session, there's some kind of release at the end. So it seems to respond to what you're saying. I mean, it seems to be true to what you're saying.
And these are retellings of a story to another person, or the person is retelling it to themselves?
Retelling to another person.
Okay, yeah, I think that I suspect that would make a difference because the other person holds the space, and I think the process is deeper. I mean, Jean has said many times that focusing in partnership, it goes deeper if it's not solo, if it's another person is there.
Yeah. I mean, there might be a retelling to themselves too, but I think can be more of a trap. Whereas when you have the whole other person holding the space, there's more room for altering the inner state.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Shlomit, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, Dorothy, but the rumination, the rumination can be a kind of a trap, right? And the mind is trying to kind of process it and maybe to feel safe. But it is important to have a witness, to be able to talk with, to have somebody present when we're doing that. But my question is about limerence. I don't know if you're familiar with limerence. It's a kind of an emotional obsessive yearning that's considered maybe like an emotional addiction, where you keep on thinking about a person over and over and over, and it can lead to kind of very intense feelings, emotional feelings. So I was thinking about the brain. What part of the brain, how does that work with the brain, where you keep on, but it's an emotional thing. It's like a yearning for somebody.
Oh, okay.
A specific person.
Well, I mean, the things that teenagers will do if they have a crush on somebody, and
exactly. But you can be an adult, even an older adult, and have those feelings, the crush, and you fixate on it.
Yeah.
And the brain can't stop thinking about it. It gets like into this gear, and it repeats itself over and over.
Yeah, this is I mean, I've had that at some points in my life. I think everyone maybe can sympathize with that. Well, I mean, it's the process of, it's one of the ways to improve memory. It's kind of like a feature of the system to improve memory, but it improves memory for something we maybe shouldn't want to remember. And so we simply, by remembering, we practice remembering our yearnings for a person, and they become that process gets more robust, becomes more hardwired.
Exactly. It's like a glitch in the system to me. Yeah.
That's
I
the thing you're missing.
it may have, again, when looking at things regarding to the system, the way humans are, or nervous system, to think of it as not as a flaw, but as a feature. It's a feature of the system. It's something that can happen. And I can see it having useful applications, in forming a bond to someone, in this case, if it's what you're describing and what we've all experienced is more the case of unrequited love. We yearn from someone, and that
Right, it's not reciprocated.
it's not required. It's not reciprocal. So this
Right.
is a kind of a dead end because something is just, it's not fulfilled. It's not moved forward. In
Yes.
focusing language, it's blocked because it wants to move forward. It yearns to move forward, and it can't.
Yes.
And it
Right.
can't find an alternative. And yeah, I mean, it reminds me of that. I think a song from the '60s. If you can't be with the person you love the person you're with, or something like that. But it kind of, the feeling was, well, if something's not possible, then do something that is possible.
Right. All right. It's something that interests me. That's why I brought it up. But I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
You're welcome. Pauline, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Tony, and thanks very much for that. It was very enjoyable. I'm at the state now. What did I want to say? Forgot. But I think just the prompts. I mean, it's linked in when Dorothy was talking about someone telling the story the whole time. And limberance is a new word, and I'm looking forward to maybe looking at that a bit deeper. So what occurred to me was forgetting as a spiritual practice. The words are very interesting to me, forgiving and forgetting, so that if I have no intention of forgiving, then I might become addicted to the victim personality. And I think Eckhart Tolle talks about an addiction for the pain body, keeps on whipping up the pain, and so I'm really interested in maybe a practice or workshops on forgetting the beliefs that I want to, so it's remembering. I think you said that, Ruth. Remembering that I want to forget limiting beliefs, so it's remembering that, so got there in the end. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. Forgetting is as important as remembering, and there are the author has a whole chapter about ways to try to do that. The person mentioned in the book, the man who could not forget, the Solomon Sherezhevsky, he tried different things to eliminate the unwanted memories. One was to imagine them as going on fire and burning up in his mind and being consumed in flames. Well, that didn't work. What ultimately did work was that the idea of imagining them being on a kind of a blackboard or a whiteboard or something. Something like it. He would put this irrelevant information on some kind of board or whiteboard or a blackboard, and just imagine it fading away or wiping it away. He imagined it to be there in the background as irrelevant information. And from a Feldenkrais viewpoint, we might call that going with the pattern. He went with the pattern to realize, well, it's irrelevant information. I'll put it where it belongs, in the background on some whiteboard, and just let it fade away or just wipe it away in that state. It went into the background and disappeared from the foreground. That's what worked for him.
Great technique, yes.
Okay, Ruth, your hand is up.
Yeah, my hand is up. Yeah, someone can put it down or I'll put it down. I just had a really strong, back to Dorothy's question, because I recently had a trauma when at the end of the, don't know if you were there, at the end of the focusing conference, about a half an hour before I left for the airport, I tripped on my pants. Believe it or not, they caught on my sandals and down I went and I broke a couple of bones and ended up in the hospital instead of the airport, and then flew back here for surgery. And one of the first focusing sessions I had after the surgery, I found this, like I had to go through the steps of this happened and this happened and this happened, and it was so cathartic and so important. So I just wanted to say that I mean, this is a different thing because it's really fresh for me. I'm 4 weeks out of surgery today and still counting, and I'm still with ice packs and not quite functional. But it was so important because everything happened so fast and there were so many huge things that happened of change of plans and change of really big change of body. When they put this heavy thing on your arm, it just torques everything and your whole body changes like overnight pretty much. And you have pains where you didn't before that have nothing to do with broken bones. To say nothing of the emotional, spiritual, and everything. And I found that for focusing session, what it gave me was a chance to begin to shift the relationship, to be with it, rather than have all these things that happened to me. And the same thing during the war of, yeah, air raid alarms and missiles raining down are scary, but there was something happening in me that was way bigger than just what was happening outside. And I knew that it was different. And I sat with it just myself, and I sometimes do left-handed writing. And now I'm getting really good at left-handed writing because I am right-handed and I injured my right hand. But what came for me right away, it was my mother tried to kill herself when I was 8 years old. And my brother and I found her. I was the oldest. And that somehow, when this war, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The what doesn't matter. But what matters is that it explained to me why something was feeling so traumatic in my life. So I just wonder if people are repeating something, it's because, and this, you said this partly, Tony, but just to give a human face to it, partly because there's a craving for a connection with what is it that's wanting to be connected with in a different way and maybe given some loving attention or anyway, so I just wanted to say that in case it might be useful to somebody, because I've just found in the last year, this is coming up in different ways for me in my life of things being healed. And the same thing goes for forgiveness we cannot forget, but we can let go of, but we don't have to forget. We can shift the relationship with so that it doesn't have that grip on us and cause us to be a person we don't want to be and behave in ways we don't want to be. Thank you for letting me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Ruth. Yes. Yeah, I find it interesting your statement about with different types of stress that were coming up with your personal injury, went to bombing, and that memory of your mother trying to commit suicide. It resonates with me because I've had the experience that when I'm in a stressful state, that stressful memories come back. And that's
right. And they show you that there's maybe something that still needs attention.
Yeah, but it's interesting because this is something in one of the that the author Lisa Genova refers to as talking about contextual learning. So for example, you're studying for a test, You expect to, drink a lot of coffee to stay awake, to do all the studying. Well, be in that same state when you're taking the test. Make sure you have enough caffeine in you when you're taking the test. So, but it's the kind of thing. So it's the state. The point is, if you want to recall something, in your case, it came up spontaneously, but if you wanted to recall something to maybe work on it, something from the childhood, go into a current or reenact a current stress state, and that might be easier to access. Not that you necessarily want to do that.
Not that I have to, because it's readily available.
It's readily available, but in case somebody is maybe, we're talking focusing about the anchor and ending a session and then trying to end it with an anchor so we can go back to it.
These are the available painkillers that are sitting here at any time. Just exhibit A.
Yeah.
And the opioid is it's put away because we let go of that 2 weeks ago.
But, if you're trying to remember something like where you left off and to continue with the focusing session, it just occurs to me now, not only remember a word, but get a kind of try to remember what state you're in when the session ended and try to recapitulate that state when picking up the session the next time.
Yeah, thank you. That so many things here.
A lot of
We
things.
could really talk about it all day, or more than all day. And I think it's time for our poem. We don't want to forget our poem, and it's time for us to stop.
Oh, wow.
So thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your attention and your questions.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Yes, I hope you come back. There's so much that I'd love to explore. It's like you opened up a whole something.
Okay, I'm glad you
and-
appreciate it.
Yes, very
Yes,
much, very much.
Thank you.
And the poem you recommended is The Guest House, one close to all of us, that we can never hear enough. The Guest House by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Yeah, the guest could clear us out from some old memories we don't want to make us ready for some new delightful memories.
Clearing a space from Rumi.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again, Tony. And
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Thank all of you very much.
bye-bye now.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.